Almost. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ and Friends. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and today we have a very special show for you where we're going to be discussing being thankful no matter what. My guest today is a dear friend who I've known for a long time. His name is Peter Soby, and he has been a quadriplegic for over 30 years, 38 years, in fact. And he's someone that I look to for inspiration, that I admire, and that I actually call when I'm not doing well. You know, those of you that have followed my journey know that I have been diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer, and I've been undergoing some very, very difficult treatment. And recently, about a month ago, one of the side effects affected the tendons in my body where I was in excruciating pain for about 2 weeks. I couldn't walk. I was pretty much bedridden. I called Peter. I said, "How the heck do you do this?" And I thought it would be a great, inspiring, uplifting conversation for Thanksgiving. Peter is a very renowned mouth painter. This is a painting I purchased of his cat Muffin, and I can't even paint with two hands. And yet he paints beautiful works of art with his mouth, and we can get you that information if you'd like to buy one of these exclusive, one-of-a-kind Peter Soby originals. But without further ado, please welcome Peter to the show. Hi there, how are you?
Hi, Chef AJ. I'm great and so happy to be here. And I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for you.
Oh, well, thank you. You're one of my favorite people. People may not know this unless they went to the Plant Powered Party, but you actually made your stand-up comedy debut in front of about 500 people in Las Vegas, and you crushed it. I mean, you're so good. You're so people. Today isn't about comedy, but you're really funny.
Wow, thanks. And, I pretty much owe it all to you, Chef AJ, because what was it, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, even by now, when you kind of invited me in on the journey of comedy alongside you?
Well, I knew that you had a gift for it, and you're really good at improv too. And I'm so thankful we can spend, once a week together since we no longer live in the same city doing improv. You know, before we get started, for those of you that are watching live and even watching on the replay, maybe just take a moment to think about what you're especially thankful for this Thanksgiving right now. I know for me, it's been 4 years since the tumors were found, so I'm thankful for another Thanksgiving. And I'm also thankful to my viewing audience because thanks to you, I have reached 250,000 subscribers. That's 250,000. And those of you that resonate with my work and watch me and appreciate it, I appreciate you too. So, Peter, what are you thankful for today and maybe every day?
Wow, and first of all, that is super amazing. 250,000. Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
And when I think about thankfulness and gratefulness, the list is somewhat long, but, first and foremost, not to be selfish, but I am grateful for my health, and the fact that I am still standing here on this earth in this small sliver of time in the history of the universe. And back when I broke my spinal cord when I was 19 years old, this was way back in August of 1987. I remember the doctors back then telling me, don't worry, quadriplegics live a long life, to their 50s or 60s. And now suddenly it's 38 years later. My 38-year life anniversary was August 14th, a few months ago. And it's like I'm in my late 50s, getting to 60. And like on one hand, it's like, oh my goodness, when I was 19, living to your 50s or 60s was so far away, and now I'm here. But Chef AJ, I'm like, I feel as healthy as can be. Like I do get bladder infections, I've got severe shoulder pain, blah, blah, blah. But every day, like I am sincerely grateful, and I'm grateful right now for my health, my perseverance. I think you know this as well as anyone that I think a positive attitude helps your body. It helps your cells. A positive attitude keeps your cells together. I think when you fall into severe negativity, that's when your cellular structure kind of starts breaking apart. I'm yammering here. Other things I'm grateful for is, I've got an amazing 11-year-old in my life, Sunday Rose. It's my good friend Anjali, single mom, daughter. I'm kind of Uncle Peter, and she just brings so much joy to my life. And I'm just grateful for like so many friends like you and Charles. And like I've got so many friends in my life. It's amazing. And even if I don't talk to them for months and months or even a year, we could just pick up where we left off. And I'm grateful for my Smack Talk Thread fantasy football buddies. We've been playing fantasy football together since like 2007 or something. And you don't realize now, like 18 years later or something, that, we've kind of been in this text thread together. And, we talk all the time, like every day or something. It's crazy. And I'm grateful for my dear friend Graciela, who lives in Virginia, that we talk every day. My dear friend Victoria in New Jersey, that we talk every day. And yeah, that was a pretty long list, I think.
Well, that is fantastic. So, you don't have to go into it to any degree that you don't want to go into it, but maybe briefly tell us what happened to you when you were 19 that left you without the use pretty much of your arms and legs.
Yeah, so I was 19. It was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year in college. I was going to community college at the time, so I was still living at home. And I was like a busy beaver, man. Like I had my own business called ATS, a Total Service, with my friend Scott Ingman. We were like partners, and we kind of did everything. Our core business was window washing and driveway seal coating, but we would do any service anyone needed. I was working out with the community college baseball team, and I really enjoyed playing baseball. I was a DJ, like I did parties and weddings and school dances. I was a DJ at the community college. Um, so much. So I had so much going on, and our ATS business was really thriving that summer. And then one summer night, August 14th, 1987, it was a long week. I didn't get a lot of sleep. There was this man-made lake, and that was Winnie the cat. If you just heard like some rumbling, he's just had his lunch and now he's running all over the ceiling. We just put up little shelves for him.
Oh.
And actually, it's Anjali and Sunny's cat, and they're on vacation right now, so we're cat sitting over here. And so anyway, but back to the story. So I was so tired. There was a dock in the middle of the lake. I just wanted to get out there and I'd never done it before, and just swim to that dock and lay on that dock looking up at the stars. And so I was with my friend Ted and a couple of girls, and I ran ahead of them down the hill, stripped off my clothes, ran to the dock, dove in, and the water was too shallow. I didn't even think about, danger. And so one minute I'm running and diving, and the next minute I'm face down in the water, and I don't know if I'm on the bottom of the water or if I'm floated away. And all I know is I couldn't move and I couldn't breathe. And, the dialogue in my head was simply like, I want to take a breath. And the other voice is like, you can't take a breath, you'll drown. And so basically, when Ted and the girls got down, they said it was like a couple minutes later, and they thought I was doing Dead Man's Float. But then it was like, this is weird. And Ted came in and he kind of picked me up on my waist, but my head didn't get out of the water, so I couldn't get a breath. And he dropped me. But then when he picked me up and dropped me, he realized my body was limp and he pulled me right back out by the head first. And I was like, don't put me back in. I can't breathe. And he pulled me to the shore. And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm paralyzed. I can't move or feel anything. And they called the police, and I just remember hearing sirens. I remember a female police officer poking me with her badge to see where I can feel. And that was the last thing I remember. I went into shock. And then, like I was in a hospital, and then they took a helicopter to a Chicago hospital because I was in the suburbs. And the next couple of weeks were kind of a blur. I was on a respirator for a few weeks, and they did, they took a piece of bone chip from my hip and did a surgery to wire it to between my fifth and sixth vertebrae to stabilize it. And then I had a halo brace on, which is a metal brace that screws into your head with wires that go to your chest to like completely mobilize you. And so yeah, basically I was just like in a bed or a cart for I think like about 4 or 5 months. And then I was in the hospitals in rehab for about 9 months and came home. And that summer, I took one class at the community college and then went back for my sophomore year at community college and finished my sophomore year. And then I transferred to the University of Illinois and finished my junior and senior year. And at that point, I never minded the cold growing up, but once I was in a wheelchair, the Chicago cold was like, mm-mm. So I'm like, I'm moving where it's warm, Los Angeles, baby. And I came to
Nice.
LA and eventually met you. And here we are today. This is crazy.
So when were you scared? How did it feel when you jumped in and you knew something was wrong and you couldn't take a breath and
Yeah, I guess it was scary, but to me, in hindsight, it's just hard to remember. It's weird that my memory of things from my past is so bad, but I do remember. I remember the moment, I remember how it felt, and it wasn't, I guess it was scary, sure, because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know any paralyzed people. I didn't know anything about spinal cord injury. I didn't know what it meant to be paralyzed. All I knew is I couldn't move and I couldn't breathe. And I just think back in hindsight, Chef AJ, that I literally held my breath for 2 or 3 minutes. And, you know, anyone out there, try to hold your breath for 30 seconds underwater. It's hard unless you're like a trained. I know there's those trained people that can hold their breath for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something, but basically, I think my body like just shut down so that all it could focus on was holding my breath. Like how else do you survive for 3 minutes underwater? Like when you didn't take a big breath, you weren't trained to do it. So, yes, I think I was scared because I didn't know what was going on, but my body fought, you know? It was like, I think my body knew it wasn't my time. And somehow, I don't know how I held my breath that long. How did I not get any water in me? No brain damage. Although maybe some people would say, I don't know about that. But yes, so yes, it was scary. I guess that was a long answer. It was scary, but in hindsight, I'm blown away by it. Not in an egotistical way, but being in awe of what your body can do to survive.
You mentioned that the doctors told you that a quadriplegic can live a long life, 50s and 60s. I'm 65, and that doesn't sound like a long life anymore, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole we want to go, Chef AJ, but when I'm thinking about coming here talking to you today, we're in two very different situations, and I can't even imagine what it feels like to be in your shoes and your body is fighting stage 3 cancer in a big picture. Like I fought for those 3 minutes 38 years ago, and your body's fighting the same way right now, but in a longer time span. But that being said, like I have thought a lot about before this interview with you about things I think about a lot now are mortality, legacy. I'm not ready to go, you're not ready to go, but nonetheless, it's, what mark are we going to leave behind? I think you've got an extraordinary mark to leave behind. You've built this incredible community and you have, you know, brought the vegan word to the world. And I'm sure like I've left a lot of good stuff behind, but there's so much more that I want to do for my legacy. And how do you feel about talking about mortality, Chef
Well,
AJ?
I don't like thinking about it, to be honest, because that's been on my mind for 4 years. But
Yeah.
really, I really want to make this about you because I'm really curious at what point when you were in the hospital, did a doctor or somebody say, "Hey, you're never going to," I mean, did you know right away that you were paralyzed and or did somebody actually have to say, "You're never going to walk again or have much use of your arms"?
Yeah, no, someone had to say that. Like I said, I don't remember a lot from the first couple of weeks because I think they had me on a lot of morphine because of the surgery. My mom and friends tell me that night of the accident and for the week after the surgery was like maybe about, I think, 4 to 7 days after the accident. I kind of don't remember, but they would say that I was complaining. Actually, it was just the day of the accident that I was complaining like how bad my neck hurt, but I don't remember that.
So
Of
you
course,
you you were even being paralyzed, you were able to feel pain or only in certain places?
I don't know. Like I don't remember. All I remember is my mom and friends that night told me in hindsight that my neck hurt me so bad, and I don't remember it. But after that, I had a respirator, so I had tubes in my nose and throat, so I couldn't talk for 2 or 3 weeks. But when I got the respirator out, I think I remember people talking to me about it, but I then remember a very specific conversation with my doctor and the surgeon who did the spinal cord fusion operation. And, he kind of spelled it out. He's like, listen, you've severed your spinal cord completely. So there's sometimes when people sever their spinal cord, but it's incomplete. So they might have some movement below the line of injury. But he's like, you're a complete injury, and that means you're not going to have use of your hands and very little use of your arms and, of course, your legs. And you'll never walk again. And chances are, for your level of injury, you'll definitely need a power wheelchair and possibly a sip and puff wheelchair. And this is something I believe my mother kind of always reminded me of this story, but I remember a little bit. But he asked me if I had any questions after he kind of explained my situation. And do you know what my first question was to him?
I don't.
My first question was, will I be able to have kids?
Oh,
I was, I kind of like had the thing. I grew up in the suburban Chicago. And when I started my own business, whether I was going to be owning a business, a DJ, a baseball player, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 25 and have a wife and 2 kids. That's what you did in Chicago. Of course, I didn't want to work in a factory all my life like my father, so I went the other route of, being an entrepreneur. And but anyway, that was my first question to him, and he said, there are ways, it's possible. And but that was what was on my mind,
did,
and then yeah, like I just had to keep learning what my limitations were and how to overcome them.
I think of you as a very kind of chill, laid back guy, very emotionally stable. Did you ever have a moment of just like terror or anger or depression or sadness or crying or why me? Or did you just like how hard or easy was it for you to accept this?
It's a good question, Chef AJ. And to be honest, once again, like the first few weeks are very fuzzy. And I know that, yeah, I am sure that I cried, especially like those first few weeks when you have this halo brace on, you can't move, people have to feed you. Of course, when I had the respirator for a few weeks, like I guess I was just getting fed by a tube. Anyway, it's very fuzzy, but I remember just having nights just staring at the ceiling. And, with the halo brace, sometimes your eyes are stuck open. So you have to sleep with your eyes open. And yeah, I cried. But and I think I had emotional conversations. I don't remember them, but there were. I do remember there was this nurse that she really like was there for me emotionally. And I don't remember the conversations, but we had very emotional conversations. And then like probably a month or 2 months, I would say, into my new journey of life, I do specifically remember laying there at night and suddenly I had a conversation with myself and it was my turning point. I wouldn't say I was depressed before then because I was like a very positive person before my accident and I was still trying to stay positive. But I remember a very specific conversation with myself. And I said, Peter, you need to promise yourself right now that you're not going to look back and be depressed. You're not going to look back and be angry. You're not going to look back and keep questioning, what if? What if I didn't dive into that lake? Because you'll drive yourself crazy. So promise yourself you're not going to do those things and promise yourself you're always going to look forward. You're always going to want to know, where am I going to be next week? Where am I going to be in a year? Where am I going to be in 5 years? Just always look forward. Always look forward. I don't know where that conversation came from, but like I grabbed it and held on to it. And that's been like my modus operandi for the rest of my life.
It's just to me, it's incredible the way you have this resiliency in your spirit for something that's so difficult. Did they offer you any kind of like emotional support or mental health services? Because for me, our situation, I feel like life is hard for everybody. Everybody has something different. You're a quadriplegic. I'm going through cancer. Other people have other difficult things. But what I've noticed in the cancer space is they're great at operating, radiating, medicating, but they don't offer really, in my opinion, any mental health services to help people deal with a terminal diagnosis. And I'm curious, in your situation for people that have these kind of accidents that become quadriplegics or paraplegics, do they offer any kind of mental health or emotional support to help you deal with this?
I mean, I will have to say, keep in mind, my accident was almost 40 years ago. So I'm sure that there's been so many advances and changes. And I would love to say, you know, more mental health. Back in the day, yes, they offered like you can speak to a therapist and they had a therapist, but I do also remember that, I grew up in a very blue collar home. My parents were factory workers. They met at a factory. We were very blue collar. My parents were like old school. So like, therapy was like quackery, you know? Like I grew up like, with the mom and dad that would, if you hear anything about a psychiatrist or therapist, that's like they're quacks, like you just deal with it, So I do remember in the beginning kind of denying those kind of services, of speaking to a therapist, and I was even like, I figured it out myself. I'm looking forward. So I guess it's a bad answer because back then, yes, they offered a therapist, but they also just like need you to move through the system. Like they need you out. They need your bed. You know what I mean? Like, and there's so much you have to do. Like you have to caregivers and finances and everything. And there was support. And I have a feeling there's possibly more support now. But like I said, mine was so long ago. I don't know how they deal with it right now.
How hard or easy is your life as a result of the accident? Because, I think about, like a lot of times I'll go, poor me, like when I couldn't walk for a few weeks and I'm like, well, you can't walk at all.
Yeah.
And there's things you can't do for yourself that other people take for granted. So, like, what's a day in the life of Peter Soby like?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Chef AJ. And it's funny, when I was younger, a younger quadriplegic, I would always, you know, positively kind of swipe that question by, like, ah, it's fine. Like, my day takes me a little bit longer, but it's all good. But, as I get older, it's like, I think it's good for people to know what the real deal is. And I think that was one of my biggest hurdles, Chef AJ, was like coming to terms with how long it takes me to get my day started. I think any quadriplegic would tell you that's like the biggest hurdle in your life. Like besides the fact that, like I'm a high level quadriplegic, I'm C5. So I can't get dressed by myself. I can't shower by myself. I can't use the bathroom by myself. I can't get from the bed to the wheelchair and wheelchair to the bed by myself. So I literally need helpers, caregivers, every single morning of my life and every single night of my life. And I've basically, I hope this isn't too frank for people, but, I've trained my bowels to go to the bathroom 3 times a week. And on those bathroom mornings, I'm looking at a 4 hour morning, sometimes a little longer between going to the bathroom, taking a shower, getting dressed, getting in the chair, getting ready. And then on non-bathroom days, like between taking a shower, getting dressed, we're still looking at 2 hours. And, it's funny too. I remember sometime I've like, when people have asked me that and they're like, oh, well, like, I remember one time, a couple of times, like a couple of women that asked me that were like, oh, I totally know what you mean. Like by the time I put makeup on and do all, it's like, it takes forever to get out of the house. Or, like I've got 2 kids. It takes us forever to get out of the house. And I've always kind of been like, yeah, okay. But in my mind, I'm kind of like, no, you do not know what it's like. Like, and that was a big hurdle to get over. No, like I can't just get out of bed and get dressed and go. Like I can't just hop in the shower, get dressed, and be out of the house in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Even then, if I have a meeting at 11 o'clock somewhere across town, even once I'm dressed in my chair, ready to go, okay, now I need, 10 more minutes to get to the car and get in the car, like I can't just jump in a car and drive. And so anyway, yes, it's like so a typical day is either 2 hours or 4 hours just to start my day. And a lot of my work I do late at night. So like if I'm up until 2 a.m., you know, I need some sleep. So if I get up at 9 a.m., on a non-bathroom day, my day doesn't really start till 11 or 12. And then say on a bathroom day, if I try to get started by 8 or sometimes 9, if I was up really late, my day doesn't start till 1 or 2, and people might think like, how can it take so long? It just does. And that was like the biggest source of frustration to get over. And still sometimes, like I try to make my mornings so fast, but it takes long.
You really
And
have
so,
to have patience.
yeah, I mean, thank God, I think I've always had patience, and this situation has taught me, you know, I've got, you know, patience the size of Africa, like heaps of patience. But it's like a constant thing, because there are days when, I need to get somewhere and you just feel like you're like, why, how does it take so long? Like, even after 38 years, there's mornings where I'm like, why does this take so long? I want to just like hop out of bed and go. So yeah, even though I've got this positive attitude and everything, I'm being honest. Like it sucks, like taking so long in the morning to get my day started. But I do have to like, you know, stay positive.
How do you do that though? Have you ever thought about writing a book?
Yeah, like most of my wheelchair life, especially because I've been in the entertainment industry and I'm a writer, I've written screenplays. People have always been like, you've got to write, your movie or write a book about your life. And I will be honest, like once again, in my younger years, I was always like, no one wants to hear my story. Like, why would, but the older I get, I've realized that being in the position that I'm in, it's almost my duty to inspire people. And now coming full circle to where we were, what I was discussing earlier about mortality and legacy, I do feel like I need to get my story out there, and more than just, doing interviews like this, it does need to be like a book or a screenplay. And can I indulge you in a little story about that?
Sure.
I don't want to dominate the conversation so much, but
It's okay.
so I have very vibrant dreams. And way back in 2010, I get movie ideas and dreams. I get song ideas and dreams. Even though I've never written a song, I'll wake up in the middle of the night with a song in my head and realize it's not a song that I've ever heard. And I'll kind of like voice record it and fall back asleep. And the next day, of course, it sounds like crap. It's awful. But one day I want to write a song from a dream. But anyway, I've gotten many movie ideas from dreams. I'll wake up and have seen a movie in my dream and realize that it's not a movie I've ever seen. The universe just gave me a movie. And back in 2010, I had a dream. The universe gave me a movie that was a Groundhog Day type of movie where a guy lives a day over and over. And keep in mind, this was before Groundhog Day was a genre, where before Time Loop was a genre, Groundhog Day was the only movie. And I was like, oh my God, mine's Groundhog Day in space. It was like the best elevator pitch. And, but I just never wrote it. And then one Groundhog Day movie after another kept coming out. And now it's a genre. Now there's like 50 time loop movies. And I was always kicking myself that I never wrote it. But finally, last year, I was like, I don't care. Now it's a genre. It's okay. So I had this movie. It was basically, I titled it the tragic, completely continually tragic demise of Biosphere 6, something like that. I always like to infuse a little absurdity, and even in my paintings, there's always like some absurd, maybe angler story. And so, but anyway, the gist of the story was, it's post apocalyptic and everyone lives in this biosphere that's kind of floating below the atmosphere. And the guy that's the architect of the biosphere is imploding and he's the only survivor. And he doesn't know what happened. And then it's a time loop. He's back to the day of the biosphere imploding and he's desperately trying to figure out how to fix it, but it implodes, everyone dies except him. And he's also estranged from his wife and daughter. Keeps going back, can't figure out what's wrong, but every time he goes back, he spends more and more time with his daughter. And he starts to realize that he's not meant to fix the biosphere. He's meant to become a better father. And by the end of the movie, he's the best father he could be, but doesn't solve the problem. Anyways, that was the dream I had. And that's the movie that I had in my mind all these years. And so there's a gentleman in England, Dominic Morgan, who does incredible like screenplay, detailed Zoom classes where you'll do like the first 4 pages or 10 pages and he micro analyzes it. And it's amazing. And he did another class where we basically started with what is your log line and what would your query letter be, and build your concept around that. And I was blown away by this, and it really like illuminated my script for me. So I had written like the first 20 pages, but in working on the log line, the query letter, it was like, hi, my name's Peter Soby. When I was 19 years old, I dove into a lake that was too shallow and broke my spinal cord and became a quadriplegic. I've sometimes wondered what it would be like if I could go back to that day and reverse my fate. And that led me to write the screenplay, The Continual Collapse of Biosphere 6, about a guy that, built a biosphere and keeps going back to try and fix it. But he ends up can't fix it, but he ends up being the best father he could be. And so we got, the log line was great, the query letter was great. And then, like, one day, like, he and I almost had the same epiphany that you see this query letter about, hi, I'm a quadriplegic. I broke my spinal cord when I was 19 years old. I wonder what it'd be like to go back to that day and fix it. I'm like, you know what? I want to see that movie, not the movie about biosphere and blah, blah, blah. And so I literally took the whole outline concept for the biosphere movie and turned it into a quadriplegic that keeps going back to the day of his accident, hoping to reverse his fate. And he doesn't. But over time, he spends more and more time with his daughter. And by the end of the movie, he becomes the best quadriplegic and father he can be. And it's called A Thousand Ways to Break Your Neck.
That sounds well, great, Peter.
So
You
it's very absurd, but this was an extremely long story, Chef AJ, but it answers your question because in this script, even though it's absurd but it's also going to be emotional, and my story will be in there, like, not really like my life journey, but what the life of a quadriplegic is that I've experienced is deeply sewn into that script. But then, yeah, maybe like when I'm done with that, I should really write my life story in a book.
I think so. So you've written other screenplays though, right?
I have, yeah. A lot of them were like back in the aughts when I was producing a lot of like straight to DVD stuff. So I would just have to like crank out these. I did a lot of like, like horror scripts, creature features. I actually did a lot of African American comedy scripts, believe it or not.
What, how did you become a mouth painter? I did put your website in the chat in the show notes. I wish people would look at the beautiful paintings you've made. This is one of them. They're just amazing. How did you learn to do that? Just paint in general, but paint with your mouth.
You know what, Chef AJ? I was never a painter before my accident, but I was always very creative and very artistic. I also have that gene in me, I believe, that you can conquer anything you put your mind to. Like, I kind of feel like I'm the Michael Jordan of quadriplegics. Like, I think I've gone above and beyond what I've never used a power chair. I've always pushed myself. So I think it's given me like way more strength that sometimes people look at me and they're like, you're a quadriplegic? But then, of course, when they see me try to use my hands, I think they would understand. But I think if you just saw me pushing down the street, you would just think I was a paraplegic. But so anyway, so I think I've got that gene in me where I put my mind to something, I can excel at it. If I want to start a business or something, I've just got that thing in me where I can excel at anything I try. And when I had the opportunity, I had this friend, Miriam. I have this another friend I'm very grateful for. Miriam Pere lives in Chicago. She's a quadriplegic, about the same level as me. We met because she reached out to me on Facebook because she saw I was a quadriplegic in Los Angeles and she's in Chicago. And she's like, I've been thinking about moving to LA. Can I ask you questions about it? And we started talking. We became great friends. She's my sister from another mister. She's the quadriplegic that we kind of lament with each other. And, we ask, like, so when your bladder does this, what do you do? When your bowels do this, what do you do? We share quadriplegic tips. And what we're going through. And anyway, she's a mouth painter, and she's like above and beyond, heads over tails, a way more incredible painter than I. And I just thought she was a mouth painter and she made her living mouth painting. And she does technically, but one day she's like, well, I belong to this organization called the MFPA, Mouth and Feet Painting Artists, whom I'm also very grateful for. Man, there's so much. I almost feel bad that I'm probably leaving out so many shout outs here. So she's like, yeah, it's an organization in Switzerland, but they have offices all across the world, and she's a member. And basically they give you a contract to paint, and their big business is doing Christmas cards and like spring cards and stuff like that. So they love Christmas motifs and spring motifs. And she's like, you should apply. And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, you're a creative, right? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, you know, uh, you should try it out. I'm like, I don't know. I'll think about it. And she's like, did you do painting before your accident? Because they really like it when you were, like artistic before your accident and now you want to continue that. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't, I, I did some art in a high school class, and I'm like, and I'm still friends with that teacher on Facebook. And I'll bet you that, when I do my application, that I could ask him to write me a letter of recommendation that Peter was really artistic in high school. And for the application, it's kind of like a long application. You have to answer a lot of stuff and like, write why you would want to be a part of them. And you have to do 6 paintings. And they only take like a few people a year around the world. I think they've got 800 artists around the world, but they only take a few people from the whole world every year. So anyway, after that Zoom, I basically told her like, I'm going to think about it because it sounds pretty awesome. But, I was like, I've got 80 other things going on. Do I want to get involved in something else? Later that day, not even joking, Chef AJ, knock on the door, package out there. It's a poster package, those poster tubes.
Yep.
I opened it up. It's my artwork from high school from that teacher. And he wrote a letter saying, he retired this year. He cleaned out his office. He's had this hanging up in his office all these years, and he thought maybe I'd want it back. And it came to me that day. And that's a teacher that I was telling her about that would probably, I didn't even know he still had, I forgot all about this art. I had no idea he had this. And how is it that, you know, 7 days before this Zoom conversation with Miriam, he shipped me this poster tube that came 2 hours after my Zoom call with Miriam. And I was like, okay, this is the universe telling me you got to do this. So I did the application, I did paintings, and I got accepted into the MFPA. And so once again, my answers are so long, Chef AJ.
Well, that's okay because they're really good ones. Well, that is amazing. And can people buy your work if they want to?
Sure. If they go to my website, petersoby.com,
Yeah.
you'll see my paintings there. And I think there's like a few of them, like the one you just showed, there's probably 10 of them that have been sold. But if you see something you like there, definitely just reach out to me through the website.
Yeah.
And
I've
I'm
also put your Instagram link too, because
oh,
if you
thanks.
want, you can give me like complete show notes and a bio, and we can ask that. I want to go back a little bit to when you were in the hospital because you had told me one time that not everyone thrived as much as you did, especially in terms of resilience, and it's very sad, but you said that a lot of people just didn't make it. I mean, like they actually committed suicide.
Yeah. Yeah, there was 2 people in my rehab rehab institute of Chicago. There was definitely we had rooms with 4 people, And in my room, there was like this hardcore gang member guy. Um, there was a gentleman that I believe was from Iran. He didn't speak English. And his family kind of kept to himself, but he was very loud and angry. There was a gentleman in my room that had a motorcycle accident from a big Italian family. And I learned a lot from him actually because he was on his way out when I was on my way in. And his family smothered him, which is great. You know, they wanted to take care of him, but he lamented that he wanted to be independent, but his family would not. They insisted on doing everything for him. And my mother always told me, because I lived with her for a year after my accident, she said the hardest thing for her to do was to sit back and watch me struggle to do something. But she knew that was the only way I would grow. Anyways, that was one case that was sad to me that this family loved him to death and it's great, but they smothered him. I don't know what happened to him, but I bet you that he didn't get far because he would never learn independence. So this other kid in my room, young guy, I mean, I was young too. He was a great kid. He he had a little more movement than I did, but he was bedridden like me for quite a while. And they gave him a power chair that he got to sit in for the first time. And he was so happy and zooming all around. And then no one heard from him. And you're in a hospital. It's like, where did he go? They're searching the grounds. And he drove his power chair into the swimming pool to kill himself. I can't even imagine it. So he died of drowning. And and so yeah, and so anyway, and then there was another guy that I don't know how he did it. Um, but they said like I don't remember his name either. He was a few rooms down. But a second guy committed suicide. Like so basically in the 6 months that I was there, two quadriplegics somehow committed suicide. And there were others that, like I said, the guy in my room that, I don't know if he'd ever learned independence. And then there was people that had even higher injuries than me that, ended up in sip and pup chairs. So anyway, for me, seeing all that made me even more motivated to be positive and independent. As sad as that is, it didn't bring me down. It made me say like, that's not me. I don't want that.
Well, that's incredibly sad.
Yeah.
Mm. So, do you ever like get real philosophical, like why me? Why did this happen? Or do you don't not go there?
Well, I made that promise that I would never like kind of like wallow in why me. But yeah, I would be a fool or a lying fool if I said I didn't think about it. Like, why did I make that decision? I wasn't drinking or nothing, but I was severely sleep deprived. And even earlier in that week, between working like 12-hour days on my business and doing everything else, I did stay up all night with friends doing LSD. So that probably didn't help me that, like, 4 nights before my accident, I was up all night on acid. I wasn't a druggie, but we were, I experimented with LSD. And, like in high school, I never drank or did drugs, but then the year after, I experimented with like, ooh, what's marijuana like? Ooh, what's LSD like? So yeah, I did have an all-nighter earlier that week that led to my sleep depravity. And So yeah, I do think about, I have thought about like, why did I do something so stupid? Why did I dive into that? Like, but I didn't know any better. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like it just makes no sense to,
Well, it's probably not helpful anyway to do that because it's not like you can, unless you do it through the screenplay, and something gets developed technologically, you can't do anything about that
yeah,
decision.
yeah, like, yeah, you just can't. And like, also, to be honest, not to get, well, this isn't religious, but since 2010, I've studied the ancient wisdom of Kabbalah at the Kabbalah Center in Los Angeles. And, you know, Kabbalah is a wisdom, a spirituality, a spiritual technology. It's not a religion, even though a lot of tenets of Kabbalah were, embraced to become Judaism, but it's not Judaism, even though there's lots of Jewish people in Kabbalah. But, anyways, I've gotten so many insights about life through my study of Kabbalah, and you learn kind of about your, like how your past lives also can affect this life. And, like that's kind of like brought me a lot of like peace of mind and a lot of like really interesting contemplation about my situation. Like in a past life, did I, you know, so like why in this life would the universe say you need to be in a situation where you need people's help every single day? So there's something I need to learn in this life that, I brought from a past life. And even if you don't believe in past lives, you can still say to yourself, what is it I need to learn in this lifetime? I'm in this situation. Yes, like when negative things happen and you overcome them, you've got to look at any obstacle in your life, any negativity, negative person as an opportunity to become a better person. That's the free will we have in life, right? To either make a bad decision or a good decision. And I constantly want to choose good decisions and positive decisions. And I do like to actually contemplate, what is it I need to learn in this lifetime to overcome? Which also, I think, since I've been studying Kabbalah, that's when I really started thinking that, you know, I was put in this position because I need to inspire people.
That's interesting that you say that because one of the live viewers named May has written in the chat, Peter, the inspiration and hope you are providing for those newly paralyzed, especially the younger ones, is priceless. You are providing, oops, it went away. You are providing how their life can still be full of adventures.
That's incredible. Yeah, like, yeah, I would love to know that I'm inspiring fresh young quadriplegics. And another grateful shout out to the Triumph Foundation, which is run by this gentleman named Andrew Skinner, who's a fellow quadriplegic, pretty much my same level. And he has dedicated his life to this foundation, the Triumph Foundation, and they go around to every hospital and rehab in California, mostly Southern California, bringing, first of all, a basket, but information, friendship to newly injured people. Unbelievable organization.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, what's the hardest thing about being a quadriplegic? If you had to pick one thing, I know there's a lot of hard things, and you make them joyous and with patience and resilience. But like, what's the hardest part, or what's the one thing you miss about not having full use of your arms and legs?
Absolute hardest part is no independence. That's one thing I've always wished for. You know, I wish I could have a weekend vacation from being a quadriplegic. I wish I could go 3 days without needing someone every morning and every night. Can you imagine like what it's like? I guess married people know this. I'm not married, but
So you're single?
yeah. Hey ladies, yep.
Yeah. Oh, and you have the same birthday as Shiloh, just
Oh,
coincidentally. So it was also
yes.
a single and handsome. Yeah, you know, have you ever done virtual reality? Like they have this thing called the Van Gogh exhibit, and they have this ride, but it's not really a ride, but you think it's a ride. Like, have you ever done that? Like, so you
I've
could,
done some VR, yeah, but
yeah,
I haven't done what you're speaking of. And I
yeah.
do want to do more VR because it is pretty awesome. But on the same hand, I don't want to get lost in VR.
Right. One of the viewers says, "Can you explain sip and puff?" It's like you blow into the chair to get it to move because you don't have use of your
Yeah,
arms, right?
exactly. Like, yeah, so sip and puff are people kind of like Christopher Reeve had sip and puff. So it's basically like a straw attachment to the motor of the chair. And like when you blow on it, you push forward. And when you sip on it, like it turns to the right. I don't know how it works, but you operate a freaking power wheelchair with a straw. So sometimes you suck in to do something and sometimes you blow. So you sip and you puff to operate the chair and you without any use of your hands whatsoever.
You know, I when I was younger, both of us are kind of we're funny people. I think we're not being funny today necessarily, but I remember when my bubby, my great grandmother, had to get her legs amputated because of type 2 diabetes. I remember saying, and I wasn't trying to be facetious. I was like 4 years old. I said, well, at least she doesn't have to shave her legs. I wasn't trying to make fun of it, but I was like, I was trying to look for something good about that. And I remember when I was diagnosed with cancer, that was really hard to try to find if there was a gift in it. You know, as you go along with any kind of disease or disability, sometimes that comes to you. But I remember like the first thing, you know, the first question I asked the oncologist, most people would ask, how long am I going to live or things like that. The first thing I said is, will this get me out of jury duty? And she said, yes, permanently. And it was like, okay, because I hate jury duty personally. So I'm curious, you do a wonderful stand-up set, and I hope that you'll put it on your channel or my channel, the set you did in Vegas. But is
It
there
is on my
anything?
YouTube.
It is on your YouTube. Okay, you'll get me that link. Is there anything good about your situation that you're like, hey, this is not so bad after all?
Yeah, to be honest, like if you want to look at the positive side, like number one, like I've mentioned several times already, it's a built-in inspiration tool. You know, there's many people you meet that they say, that thing where it's like you're meant to affect like people in the world, you're meant to have an effect on people, and everybody else that's not in a wheelchair, they you got to work hard to figure out how you're going to affect lots of people's lives. Me, it's built in. You look at me, I'm a guy in a wheelchair, but don't look at me with pity. Be inspired by me, what I've overcome. So that's a positive that I've got a built-in inspiration mechanism. Number two is even though before I was in a chair, I felt like I could walk into a room and be in command. But, when I walk in a room, unless it's a room full of wheelchairs, like I'm different than everyone else in that room. And some people might be apprehensive about it, but other people might be curious about it. But, you know, I stand out in a crowd. Like if you went to a event and met 40 people, including myself, who are you going to remember? Like, 20 white guys standing around or the guy in the wheelchair? You're probably going to remember the guy in the wheelchair. So I've kind of got like, an inspirational edge and a unique edge over many other people.
I love the way you look at things. I want to read a quote from a live viewer. Peter, the inspiration and hope you are provide. Oh, wait, no, I read that one. Sorry, there's another one. Listening to Peter's story has been the highlight of my Thanksgiving. Love this so much. Sending all my love to you. You
Uh,
know, Well, you just proved that really it's not what happens. It's kind of like I don't know if you're familiar with the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was in the concentration camp and he watched all his family died and he was a psychiatrist and he talked about it's not so much what happens to you in life that defines you, but your how you feel about it, your reaction to it. So you are really an example of resiliency and a life well lived, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, and that I'm grateful for those words, and
Yeah. And
I
you're
feel
just
it's
funny as heck. People, I wish, this is kind of a serious subject today, but I wish people, and Judy is here. She's in our improv class and she says she loves doing improv with you. I wish people could watch that comedy clip. You'll get it from me. We'll put it in the thing and see, we don't spend all day talking about this. I mean, this is probably the first time you and I have ever talked about your accent. Mostly we're just having fun and doing comedy and getting better at our craft.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely been a fun journey. Like that's one thing I'm so grateful for is that you did invite me to join you in that stand-up workshop, and it was a place for me to finally really plug my sense of humor somewhere. And then the improv workshop with the comedy workshop with Carrie Otis, and now the improv workshop we do every week with Patrick Bristow. And it's just so amazing and cathartic to spend an hour or an hour and a half every week just getting to kind of let go and exercise the comedy muscle, in a safe place. And yeah, a place to just especially in the improv, you actually learn so much about life doing improv.
Yep.
It's
I've been
insane.
trying to get people to do it for years. They're so afraid. You are rather fearless though, aren't you? You didn't even seem nervous in Vegas. You
Well,
just
it's a Michael Jordan gene,
yeah.
like even in Vegas before getting up before 500 people, I turn that notch that just says, yeah. And it was even like, think about it. Right before I got on stage, getting up the steps, they almost dumped me out of my chair. Like it was like too many people came to help,
Yeah.
and like one side tilted me too far, and I literally almost fell out of my chair. And I'm not saying it to complain, but that might have thrown a lot of people off. Like having this, crazy experience going up 3 steps where you're almost out of your chair and discombobulated. Then you got to go up and do this set, but as soon as it happened, it was weird. And the microphone was turned on. So everyone heard me like, whoa, 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 I'm falling. Like they heard it and like over the loudspeaker. And I wonder if people were thinking like, is this part of the act? Is it whatever? And maybe they did, but I remember when I finally got combobulated and even my microphone headset, the pack got kind of tangled in the back and I couldn't move my head as much as I wanted to, but it was kind of too late. And that's the way it was. And I did mentally say, it's over, move on. You got a set to do.
Well, you did great, Peter. Is there anything in life that you haven't accomplished yet that you want to do?
Well, yes, I want to finish the screenplay of the
Well, I
Otherwise
want
a
you to
Great.
I want you to finish it too. Who would you cast as Peter Soby?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that there's always so much talk about, you know, an actual real life, a disabled person playing disabled on the screen. However, playing disabled is Oscar bait. Think about all the disabled roles that have won Oscars, like, Daniel Day-Lewis, My Left Foot, um, the gentleman that played Stephen Hawkins. I don't know if he won the Oscar, but he was nominated. Billy Bob Thornton playing the mentally disabled guy.
Yep.
Whatever, it's Oscar bait to play disabled. But I am thinking that, I'm also a producer, and I imagine I would love to just sell the script, but I think I would also stay a producer on the script. I there's two things that fascinate me. One is casting two people, casting an actual disabled person to play the quadriplegic, and casting an able-bodied person to play the quadriplegic when he's not injured.
No,
And they're
that's interesting.
and
Yeah.
they're two different people, but and yeah, we would cast. So if Brad Pitt is playing the main character who's able-bodied, yeah, you try to find someone close to that, but it doesn't even matter if they're not close to that. It's like the Hunt for Red October when everyone's speaking Russian and the camera zooms into their mouths as they're speaking Russian, and then they start speaking English and the camera zooms back out and it's Russian movie, but everyone's speaking English. So anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing would be to cast a disabled person, but now with like CGI,
Yeah.
put their face on an able-bodied actor.
Well, that's going to be interesting. I look forward to seeing that in the theater. We have time for one more question. What hope could you give to people that maybe they're not quadriplegic, but that are, people are going through a lot of stuff. And I wanted you to come on to inspire people that you can still be thankful no matter what and have a great life and a great future. But maybe somebody out there today, they're alone, they're not well for whatever reason. What can you say that might make them feel a little bit hopeful or inspired?
Really quick, the other thing I want to accomplish in my life is open a donut shop. That's always been a dream of mine.
Hope make it a vegan donut shop and then
Yes.
I'll go.
Yeah, because I do need a good pastry chef
All
for the
right.
recipes. But
Yeah.
anyway, I would tell a person out there that's feeling alone, that's feeling pain, sorrow, depression, even if you feel like there's no friend or anyone out there for you, there is someone out there for you. I'm out there for you. You could reach out to me on any of my social medias, and I'm out there for you. But if you're alone, to answer your question, what do? You just, I know this sounds like so basic and, maybe a bunch of hogwash, but you got to look forward. Like, just see the future and aim for that future. Even if that future is like, I want to be out of my house, having coffee next week and meet someone at a coffee shop. Make that your goal and aim for it. Don't sit there and wallow is such a bad word. Just don't sit there and stay in that state of mind. Don't be in that state of mind. Get in the state of mind of looking forward, no matter how desperate your situation is. I don't know that I don't know how that sounds, but
No, it
that's
sounds great. Never look back. Well, Peter, thank you so much. And it's such an honor to have you on my show. And it's so wonderful to know you personally and be friends with you and get to play with you at, no, that sound right. Get to do comedy with
hey
you
now.
get every week. And if you want to get into, yeah, this is so funny that somebody put in the show notes, you have great hair. We have an ongoing joke. Our improvisational teacher, Patrick Bristow, every week, all he talks about is Peter's hair. So check out Peter's website, maybe buy one of his paintings and do what Peter does. Live a life of inspiration to other people and always pay it forward. Peter, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you have something fun to do today.
Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, I'm going to be with some really great friends.
That's great. And please come back Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'm going to introduce you to a wonderful plant-based doctor you might not have heard of, Sarah Ann Schumann, who I went to Rancho La Puerta, not Rancho Compassion. That's Miyoko Shinner's place. She's going to be talking about mindful self-compassion. Thank you guys so much for watching and for subscribing. And